Welcome back to the Unacceptable News. I'm your host, Justin Bush. For whom does the bell toll? So today's story is about missing time. Many skeptics have claimed over the years that missing time simply doesn't exist, that it's, normal amnesia, drug-induced hallucination, blackout, some sort of narcolepsy, some sort of fainting disease. We know that there's much more to this than meets the eye. There was a wonderful story that came out a few years ago about Konstantinos Philippidis. Now, Mr. Philippidis was skiing in New York with his family, and then he apparently blacked out. And then he woke up several days later in California, over 2,000 miles away from where he was. He was still in his ski jacket and his goggles and everything that he had when he was on the mountain. He claimed, or at least the report claims, that he remembered being in the back of a truck for some reason, but that's all he remembered. Now, he didn't have his passport. They know he didn't fly on an airplane. So why do you have this person with missing time waking up, thousands of miles away? Apparently something happened where he just decided to go, to California, leave his family behind with no money, no way of traveling, no way of commuting. I mean, how or why would a person just simply have a missing time event and then go on an excursion to California? It doesn't make much sense. But many of these missing time events, they culminate with a UFO before or after the event. So, for instance, in the Benny and Barney Hill case, we can show you a clip of that.
Deeper and deeper. Fully relaxed. All muscles are relaxed. You're comfortable. Relaxed. You will not be anxious or distressed, but you will remember everything and you will tell me everything.
Yes. I think I will stop. And I have not stopped. And Betty said, "Look, there's a star moving." And I look and I see a star. It's funny. But I said, "Betty, that's a satellite. We are seeing a satellite." And then I pulled over to the side of the road, and Betty jumped out on her side with the binoculars, and I got the chain, and I hook it to the dog on her collar, and I say, "Come on, Dulcie, let's get out." She jumps out. And I look toward the sky, and I look back to Dulcie and walk her around the trunk of the car. And I'm saying, "Hurry up, Betty, so I can get a look." And Betty passes the binoculars to me. And I see that this is not a satellite. It is an airplane. It is an airplane. You can see, I think, you can see the rows of windows. And it is an airplane. And I tell Betty this. And give the binoculars back to her. And I am satisfied. And I drive, and Betty is still looking, and she says, "Barney, that is not a plane. It is still following us." And I stop. And I look and I see it is still out there, off in the distance. So I searched for a place to pull off the road. And I see a dirt road to the right of the main highway. And I think this is a good place I can pull off. And if any car comes, it won't strike me. And I am thinking, this is strange, because it is still there. And Betty said, I think she said, I am mad with her. I said, I believe Betty is trying to make me think this is a flying saucer.
Was it light enough to see?
It was just a light.
You can remember everything now.
It's right over my right. God. What is it? And I try to maintain control so Betty cannot tell I am scared. God, I'm scared.
It's all right. You can go right on, experience it. It will not hurt you now.
I got to get my gun.
All right. All right. That's all. Stop. Go to sleep, Steve. You forget now.
Oh, Lord. And I think I'm not afraid. I'll shoot it down if I'm not afraid. And I walk out, and I walk across the road. There it is up there. Oh, God damn it.
Calm down. Calm down. It's there, but you can see it, but it's not going to hurt you. Go on.
Why doesn't it go away? Look at it.
She didn't see anything. She says, I'm a retired military colonel, and it wasn't anything. It was just a military.
I used to have the 45th Air Division. Well, you remember Wayne and Sue Bond? They used to come back here when Pease was out here. He was a lieutenant colonel.
Yeah, I think I know who he is.
Yeah. I mean, I had the 45th Air Division here every Sunday morning for waffles and champagne.
And you were teaching them?
And listen, I'm probably the only person in the world who has been paid by the Air Force to go to different Air Force bases and lecture to them on UFOs.
That's what I try to tell people in the government, that the government doesn't know what the government knows.
I mean, when you say government, my God, we got everything.
Okay.
Yeah, it must be one.
So what is missing time really? I've experienced it many times. I've seen a UFO, or I've seen a creature, an alien creature, and then you blink and you're in a completely different location. Hours later, sometimes it's 2 or 4 or 5 hours later, in a completely different location. You have no idea what just transpired. We have cases coming from David Paulides, who has done research into his missing 411 cases, where in these national parks, these people go missing. Sometimes they're never found, sometimes they are. But many of the people that are found have no idea what happened. They cannot remember. For them, they say, well, I was here and then I came to and I was here. And they have little to no memory of anything that happened in between. And sometimes these cases can stretch on for days. So a lot of researchers kind of say, well, maybe they hit their head, they fell, they hit their head, and they just can't remember. But a lot of times these people are not found with any sort of injury, a head injury or any sort of illness that would explain, several days of missing time. You have researcher Bud Hopkins, who took a real deep look into missing time cases, and we could show you a clip about that.
Hello and welcome to On the Record. It's been almost 30 years since the first modern case of abduction by aliens was reported. Then, as now, the topic has generated scorn and ridicule, but very little serious research and investigation. My guest today might be called the father of the abduction hypothesis. It was his first book, Missing Time, that triggered intense nationwide, even worldwide interest in the field. His second book, Intruders, lent even more credibility to a topic that needs all it can get. Bud Hopkins, thanks for being here.
Thank you.
To begin with, in the preface of Intruders, you say, right off the bat, you're not going to believe a lot of this. You compare it to the Nazi concentration camps and how the human mind just can't accept things that are out of a certain realm. Why is that?
Well, I think that we've lived with a kind of range of possibility around us, which we all understand and are familiar with. We don't understand how when that range of possibilities is radically expanded, that it becomes a little terrifying. Look what happened almost to Galileo and Copernicus when the simple argument was made that the sun was the center of our particular solar system instead of vice versa. They almost lost their lives for making that kind of assertion. This is the ultimate Copernican revolution because the evidence suggests, beyond any doubt as far as I'm concerned, that we're being visited by some form of intelligence which is higher than ours and some kind of technology which is higher than ours, and it is able to pick up human beings at will as objects of study, the way we might a lesser species, and diddle with their memories, their ability to recall. Physical operations take place which leave physical marks on their bodies. There's an extensive interest in human genetics. This seems to be the core of the whole thing. To admit all of those things as possibility, as a real possibility, is to be staggered. So we keep it at arm's length conveniently, but it does, I think, upset more and more people as they see the evidence for it.
You're not a scientist, but you are as close as we get to an expert on this topic. Explain your credentials, how you got started, and why you have become something of an expert on it.
Well, I'm essentially a painter and sculptor. I'm an artist, and I got involved in this whole strange subject by the fact of having a UFO sighting myself in the daytime with a couple of friends in 1964. And up until that time, I was fully convinced that the Air Force had said they were balloons or something or other. I never knew what, and I accepted that. But then when we saw this thing flying around, it's a long story in itself, I was very aware that, okay, there's something up there that has not been explained. And I began looking into it very thoroughly and reading about it. And ultimately, a man I'd known for many, many years told me about this thing landing near his car and little men getting out and taking soil samples. He was quite terrified as he was telling me the story, and all he knew about me was that I was a neighbor and a customer in his store, not that I had any interest in the subject. And I looked into that case. It occurred right across the Hudson River from Manhattan in a park in New Jersey, and I found other witnesses to the whole thing from other points of view, and I published an article about it in a New York newspaper, and I concealed deliberately certain details about the UFO, its color, certain details about the weather condition, because I wanted to, I was convinced that there were other witnesses, and I wanted to have some way of checking their veracity. And in fact, we got something like 7 or 8 other witnesses who were right about these missing details. And so I knew, all right, these things are flying around, they're going on. The whole business is going on. And as I began to look further, I ran into more and more abduction cases, and I simply followed where the evidence led. And I used my best judgment. I think all of us have a kind of innate common sense about this sort of thing, about how to go about conducting the examination.
There is a pattern, I guess you could say, a typical abduction. Tell me what the pattern, what it entails.
The pattern, well, essentially, a person is abducted first as a tiny child. The way we might pick up a pup from some seal or something that we're going to follow. That child is very often then cut, very often at the leg, the back of the leg, from the leg, as if a layer of cells are being removed systematically, and that leaves 2 kinds of scars, either a circular scoop mark which I see over and over again, a depression, which is perfectly round or oval, or a straight line cut, and there's no bleeding and no pain, and the mother is very upset when she notices this on her child, especially if it's, say, it's up the back of the leg and the child is wearing pants, and the mother that night undresses the child. There's no tear in the pants, and here's this cut, and it's associated with the child having been missing. Well, anyway, that kind of incident in childhood is very often one of the very first experiences that people have, abduction experiences. Then it's as if they're tracked through life. There are many, many people who report a needle with a tiny ball on the end, which is inserted up the nostril, breaks through up in here, hurts. When the needle comes out, there's no little ball on the end, as if an implant has been put in place. Sometimes that needle goes in the eye socket, under the eyeball, or in the ear. And there's a lot of physical evidence to support this, although to my knowledge, we do not have one of these objects in our possession, but we certainly have the traces of them, and they have turned up on MRIs, which is a magnetic resonant imaging. It's a process that hospitals use. And then that person in later years is sampled further in terms of reproductive cells. Ova and sperm samples are taken, and the whole project is as if that person's bloodline is being followed, studied in depth. It's a very complicated story, but this is the pattern that we run into over and over again.
And it's sometimes the family is followed for generations.
Exactly. And incidentally, George, we're dealing not with the proverbial man in the pickup truck and the bib overalls in the middle of a field somewhere. I've worked with abductees, one of whom is a NASA scientist. I've had now 3 psychiatrists come to me to have me help them through hypnosis and otherwise recall their own abduction experiences. I've had police officers. I've had military personnel. I was dealing with an Army officer of very high security clearance recently who was an abductee. Doctors, nurses, scientists, housewives, you name it, whatever it is. And incidentally, some people who were nationally known in the entertainment field and so on. And yet most of these people want anonymity. They do not want ridicule. They do not want their names used. They do not want publicity. They are very frightened by what's happened to them.
Is there a common denominator, or is they just picked at random? Do you get a feeling for it?
When you think that they're picked as tiny children, let's say maybe 1 year old, 2 years old, the accent seems to be on the genetic material rather than any kind of personal qualities, which are hard to know in a 1-year-old child. But it's very interesting that the psychologists, and this is one of the very first objective studies that was ever done, we commissioned a psychologist to test some abductees without telling the psychologist that these people had reported these experiences. We said, we're looking for patterns. What do these people share? We're also looking for psychopathology. And it turns out that there was no heavy-duty mental illness or psychopathology with any of the 9. But the pattern that turned up was very interesting. She said all of them showed a lowered self-esteem. These are people who were very capable in many respects, happy lives and good lives and so forth, but their self-esteem level was way down. They felt somewhat ill at ease with their physical body, with their sexuality and so forth, somewhat separate from that. And they felt a higher degree of suspicion, and they had more trouble trusting other people and making relationships work and so forth. And when we told her that these people were reporting these abduction experiences, she said, well, her tests showed that there was no psychopathology present with any of these 9 that would explain these accounts as some sort of psychological aberration. And she said, though it doesn't, nothing proves that they had the experiences, she said, if they had these experiences, these are exactly the sorts of problems you would find.
The big problem some people have with the whole field is the use of hypnosis. That it maybe as a tool it's over-exaggerated, that there have been abuses in how it's approached. Your defense of hypnosis?
Well, essentially we have, the most important thing to start with is between 20 and 30% of all the cases we have, people remember them without hypnosis. Some of the most famous cases, the Travis Walton case, the Charles Hickson, Pascagoula case, many, many cases where they remembered it all without hypnosis. So what you're remembering under hypnosis is exactly the same as what turns up in just normal recall. I think that all the tape recordings that I have of my hypnotic sessions, I would certainly defend. I would certainly allow somebody to listen to one of those tape recordings if they had any suspicion that witnesses are being led or anything of that sort. It is abused by, I think it's a subtle business, and not everybody knows how to do it right. It's one of the things that I'm trying to do, is to train therapists, psychologists, investigators, and so on in the particular use of hypnosis in these cases. But I can assure you that people are not being led. I make attempts sometimes to try to lead them in a direction that I know to be false, and they immediately say no and back.
One of the other things you're trying to do is help some of the people who have been through this experience,
That's the center.
to get through it.
Many researchers over the years, many UFO skeptics have claimed that missing time doesn't exist, that it's amnesia. But we have these stories that show us that it's so much more than that. If you'd like to support our channel, go to the description or in the pinned comment down below. That's the unacceptable news. Don't like, don't subscribe, just run.